normalize these conversations. So in our house, we don't talk about the specific amount of money that we make. We don't talk about our specific net worth. But if one of my sons wants to know how much did that car cost? How do you finance this? Or how much did a house cost? They can go look that up on the internet. My boys are
Yeah.
12 and almost 14 now, and we talk about those things. It's normal. It's normal to talk about money in our household. So that's number one.
Hello and welcome to today's podcast, a truly enlightening session that every parent and future parent won't want to miss. Today, we're exploring the vital topic of nurturing the right financial mindset in our children. It's a subject close to many of our hearts as we strive not only for our success, but for the success and well-being of future generations. I'm thrilled to introduce Chris Larsen, the founder of Next Level Income, who channels his expertise into guiding others towards financial independence through education and strategic investment opportunities. He's also the co-author of No Problem Parenting, Raising Your Kids with More Confidence and Less Fear. An accomplished all-American cyclist and one of the top 10 in the world. Well, top 10 cyclists, Chris not only knows what it means to compete at the highest level in sports, but also understands discipline, the mindset required to achieve excellence, principles he applies to both investing and parenting. In our conversation today, Chris will share his insights on instilling a healthy financial mindset in our children, laying the foundation for their future financial independence and success. So whether you're a parent, grandparent, or planning a family, this episode is packed with valuable lessons and strategies. So welcome, Chris.
Ravi, it's great to be here, man. Good to see you.
Yeah, you too. It's funny, we were talking before we started recording, and in fact, we transacted on a deal together that I didn't even realize till we just spoke. It was
Yeah,
one of the
almost
first,
5 years ago. Yeah.
yeah, it was a little while ago. It was one of the first deals we purchased in Viking, and we sold to you guys, and you guys
Yeah.
well with it. So it was great to hear.
Yeah, it was a good little handoff, and yeah, it's a small world, and it really shows you, the world of real estate. It's a it's a small fraternity, if you will, and it's great to be here with you. Great to see you. I've spent a lot of time with your partner Vic as well, and have
Yeah.
a lot of respect for what you guys do. You guys have a great team.
Well, thank you for that. I'm really happy to have you on the podcast and finally meet you after so many years. Let's start with a brief introduction about you. Tell me about your
Yeah.
background, your journey, how you got to where you are today.
Yeah, so you mentioned the cycling, and look, when I was younger, that's what I wanted to do. I wanted to be a professional cyclist. So I went to Virginia Tech, and I went for engineering, as if you could like read my degree on my wall.
Yeah.
Actually, and it was actually biomechanical engineering, Ravi, and I was able to use that in addition to my MBA, and I spent about 18 years in the medical device field, so I got to work with a lot of your colleagues over the years. But that's not what I really wanted to do when I went to school. I just wanted to race my bike, and I said, I'm going to race, I'm going to go pro, and I'm going to eventually figure out what I want to do, go back and get a master's degree, do that sort of thing. Um, Unfortunately, what happened was in between my freshman and my sophomore years, and I talk about this in my book, which I'm happy to share with your audience that's listening here today, if you want a copy. But my best friend passed away, and he had a brain hemorrhage. We actually at a bike race, and I went back to school. I put my heart, my soul, all my energy into racing my bike, and it was like my therapy that following year. And after doing that for a year, I was racing and I was very successful, um, and but I felt nothing. And for
Yeah.
anybody that's ever been in love or ever been really dislike somebody, I really don't think the opposite of love is hate. It's really indifference. And I had this indifference towards cycling. I came back to school that following year, my junior year, and I quit. And I did pick up racing again as an age graded cyclist, and
Yeah.
in my 30s, which is where I had some of those results that you spoke of. But after my friend passed away, Ravi, I decided that I didn't want to have regrets in life. And one of the things that dawned on me was you need financial resources to be able to live life on your own terms. So I set off on this journey to become financially independent, which ultimately led to, as you mentioned, next level income and what we do today on the education side.
Oh, that's wonderful. And sorry to hear about your friend. Was that an accident during biking? Is it?
So, it wasn't. He did die at a bike race, but he actually had a massive brain hemorrhage, and died instantaneously.
Wow.
And interestingly enough, I was discussing with my my older son last night, and he said it was like a bomb went off in his head. And yeah, he fortunately he didn't suffer, but it was very sudden. And it had a massive impact. And it's interesting. Malcolm Gladwell talks about this in his book. I think it's Outliers that he talks about. It might be David and Goliath, but he talks about the correlation of individuals that are successful, that reach CEO status, that reach the level like a president of a
Right.
country, and a lot of them have lost a parent. I also lost my father, but I would say that losing my best friend was more impactful. And as an engineer, as an analytical person, the way I describe it is, when we're young, we feel like we're going to live forever. So if you
Yes.
think you're going to live forever, really the value of time, if you're going to live forever, is very small. But as soon as you put a number on the number of days you're going to live, the value of each day goes up exponentially. I think
Yeah.
that's that realization that I subconsciously came to and said, you know what, every day is so valuable. And I really felt like I had to live every day, not only to honor the life I had, Ravi, but also the life
Yes.
that my friend Chris didn't have any longer.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. I completely that completely resonates with me. And we all have had people close to us pass away, and my grandparents and aunts and uncles, and then that
Yeah.
message reverberates in my mind. And then
Yeah.
and this podcast is about kids, and we think about our kids and our interactions with
Yeah.
them, and like our love for them, and
Yeah.
we realize that, hey, look, this is something we should appreciate, we should be grateful for every day. And
Yeah.
also there's a point in their lives where they're gonna grow up. They're gonna be their own person. They're not gonna want to hang
Right.
out with mom and dad anymore. I don't know how old
Yeah.
your kids are, but mine are at the age where they still think I'm cool,
Yeah.
which is which is a good place to be.
That-
I'm
That's pretty neat.
sure in
Yeah.
a yeah, I'm sure in a couple of years that's going to change. But yeah, we want to support them. So this is what this podcast is about, and I'm really
Yeah.
excited to delve into this. So maybe
Yeah.
you can talk about, like, your experience in financial education for children, and how you were able to co-author that book.
Yeah. So, we started on the syndication side, on the investment side, working with investors, Ravi, in 2015. My original partner and I, we closed our first deal in 2016, and we worked with dozens, now at this point hundreds of investors. And what's interesting is people would come to me and they'd be like, "Well, Chris, how did you get where you are?" Is people in their early 20s all the way up into, I mean, we work with investors now that are in their late 80s. But some people would come to me and they'd ask me questions like, "Hey, Chris, like, what would you recommend I do starting my career? What would you recommend would be my first investment? I can't invest in your deal. How can I get to that point?" And I'd answer these questions. I'd take a phone call. I'd send out an email. What I realized, Ravi, was these questions started to repeat themselves. So I would just like cut and paste the email. And I thought, wow, well, we need to have a curated source of information. So started
Right.
writing blog posts, and then my director of marketing at the time said, "You should start a podcast." So we started a podcast, recorded our first episode at the end of 2018. We're more than 5 years into it now at this point, Next Level Income Show. And the whole idea was to curate financial information to help improve financial literacy. We even started a financial literacy program for a nonprofit here in Asheville. And, it's interesting, Ravi, because that program for the nonprofit was really designed for high school students. But you know who would show up? Their parents. Their parents would show up in the back of the room.
Yeah.
So it's really, if you're listening to the show, chances are you have a level of financial literacy that is far above the average person in this country.
Right.
And you're looking to teach your children, but it's funny because a lot of parents are looking for that information for themselves as well. So, we do that on the website, but over the years, I've really come to really enjoy providing resources. So we have a page dedicated on the website now, nextlevelincome.com/kids. And we have several books on there. We also have, probably some of the stuff that we'll get to talk about here today.
Yeah, yeah, that's great. And we share that same passion. We
Yeah.
we also want to educate our investors, friends and family, because this education is so important, and we don't get enough of this in school. I went through,
Hardly any. Yeah.
yeah, I went through, college. I went through medical education, residency, all that stuff. And not once did we ever learn how to manage our income as physicians. That's why you see most of these physicians that are just clueless about
Yeah.
how to save, how to invest. They're just, constantly in the grind and
Yeah.
trading time for dollars.
Yeah.
And that's not really how you achieve wealth.
Yeah.
Um,
Well, let me take it
yeah,
a step further, Ravi.
yeah,
And sorry to interrupt, but my MBA is
sure.
in portfolio management. I mean, so we're talking about, I have some of the highest level of financial education that you can get in our education system,
Yeah,
and they don't even teach you the stuff that we're going to talk about today, like the basic stuff, like how to become financially independent. We
right.
talk about derivatives and we talk about modern portfolio theory and portfolio allocations and Sharpe ratios and all that stuff. And that's great, but it's kind of
Yeah,
like being a surgeon and knowing how to perform an operation, but you can't even tell your patient, what to do to get healthy in the first place.
right.
And if we could teach patients how to eat healthier, how to exercise, how to do some of the basic things that
Yeah,
would make them healthier in general. It's kind of the same thing in the financial world. We have all these sophisticated tools like a surgeon does, all
yeah.
this technology, yet we're still performing terribly in terms of finances. So I think there's a lot of similarities between the two worlds in this country.
You're absolutely right, and you're completely speaking my language because I practice functional medicine, which is root cause
Yeah.
medicine,
Yeah.
tackling those root causes of disease, and there's a root cause of financial distress, and you're
Yep.
bringing that up exactly.
Yeah. I-
Um,
Indeed.
yeah. So let's get to the five principles that you
Yeah.
outline in this chapter. So let's get to it.
Yeah.
Maybe you can start kind of listing them off and describing them.
Yeah, so I think the first one is, and this isn't even number one, but the first one is, just like, having conversations about health and simple things that we can do, have conversations about money in your household. This can be with your spouse, but it also should be with your children. Normalize these conversations. So in our house, we don't talk about the specific amount of money that we make. We don't talk about our specific net worth. But if one of my sons wants to know, how much did that car cost, and how do you finance this, or how much did a house cost, they can go look that up on the internet. My boys are
Yeah.
12 and almost 14 now, and we talk about those things. It's normal. It's normal to talk about money in our household. So that's number one. But on the list here, so if you go to nextlevelincome.com/kids, you'll see I say start bank accounts.
And
So
and Chris, let me ask
yeah,
you this question. Now, you
yeah,
mentioned you
absolutely.
don't talk about your net worth, you don't talk about your
Correct. Yeah.
income, and tell me why
Yeah.
that is.
Yeah, so I think there's certain things in life that there's not a lot of upside to discuss, right? I think how much money you make, what your net worth is. That's a very private matter. When it comes to certain things, especially if people are we have podcasts, you and I, Ravi. If you're a public figure, there's certain things that it behooves you to keep private, and I think
Yeah,
kind of educating my children, hey, it's okay not to talk about these things.
right.
Um, you know, you don't, especially at our level, the boys don't need to be going around and talking
Yeah,
about, how much money their parents make or what they're
yeah,
worth and that sort of stuff.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. And I just wanted to hear your insights on that. I
Yeah.
completely agree.
Yeah.
They don't understand how to conceptualize that, and
Yeah.
they may start bragging to their friends
Sure.
about that,
Yeah.
like, oh, hey, we've got this, we got this amount of money, we got this, and that's something
Yeah.
you absolutely want to avoid. And we may get to this in our conversation, but one thing that I want to instill in my kids is to understand the importance of money. And when I grew up, um, my father, as an immigrant, he didn't have a lot. He came to this country with $200 in his pocket, and that's
Wow.
it. Did
Wow.
nowhere to stay. Had no relatives.
Mm,
He had just
mm,
figured it out all on his own, and
yeah.
he instilled in us, based on frugality and
Yeah.
being thrifty
Yeah.
about money and reusing things, like the importance of it. I feel really blessed and grateful to be in a position where we have more uh, than I did as a kid,
Yeah.
but I don't want my kids to take that for granted. Um,
Correct. Yeah.
and maybe we'll get to this, but how do you
Yeah.
how do you tackle that issue?
Yeah, I think, we're talking about a lot of great philosophical stuff, which is, kind of outside of these like steps, if you will. But but as or even more important. So I think, the what is it? Shirt sleeves, sleeves in three generations is the saying. If we don't teach our children the same things that you and I learned, from our parents, Ravi, then they're bound to, not be good stewards of the financial resources that we leave them. So I think, it's a again, that's why it's so important to talk about money and have rules in your household. We'll talk about some of the rules that we have, in our household. But again, like, if it's public information, like if I was a CEO of a company and I made $1 million salary a year and my boys could look that up, I would tell them that. But,
Yeah.
certain things, it's like, hey, it's okay to keep certain things private while you can also talk about that within the family. Just like certain conversations. And unfortunately, in today's political climate, it might not behoove people to go out and publicly declare certain things, but
Right.
we should be able to talk about these things with our trusted, friends or family members
Right.
that are there.
So
So
when you say
yeah,
talk about money, you're saying,
yeah,
hey, talk about the cost of certain items and, their
yeah.
clothes, their shoes, their computer, or whatever it may be.
That's right. And I think so we can kind of get into like how do you do that and kind of teach children that. So, the bank account is the first thing, right? So it's
Yeah.
like we also have green light cards for our kids, so
Oh,
they can you basically have their own credit card so they can actually spend money. So it's like, okay, you have a bank account. Like, why do you have a bank account? What is the bank account for? What is a credit card for? And our children, I want them to understand that when I go to the store and I put my credit card, or now, I mean, shoot, I just look at my phone, right, and wave it over the pay station there, and it's almost like magic. So how do you get back to taking like cash in your hand and handing it over and teaching children about that? So I think the bank account is one thing. Like a green light card or something like that is another thing. But then also, where does money come from? So our second step is pay your children. So we pay our children in two different ways. So a lot of people that are listening, you're listening today. You're a high income professional. You may get a salary. You may have a commission. Maybe you have a business, and that's a little bit different. So we pay our children $1 a day, and some people call that an allowance. I prefer to call it a salary because I want our boys to understand that if you work for somebody, you get a certain amount of money, but it's not really related to your production necessarily. So I want them to see that. They also do jobs for us as employees of our company, and they can make more money with that. And that also allows us to we started Roth IRA accounts. So that means that money that they make can go into those accounts. So what we do is we do um, two things, and this kind of goes from paying your children to step three, which is teaching them about investing. If your children are younger, so how old are your children, Ravi?
9 and 11.
Yeah, so they're getting to the same age as our kids, but let's say they're younger. Let's say your kids are like 5, 6, 7, 8 years old, and they're making a little bit of money. How do you teach them and encourage them to save? It's a very abstract concept, right?
Yes.
So what I do is, and I don't love qualified plans like 401ks and IRAs and those sorts of things, but like if you have a 401k and you get a company match, that's a really nice benefit. So if one of my boys, they get paid $30, say, for a month, if they put $15 in the bank, I'll match that. I'll match
Mm.
that. So that's kind of like, that kind of teaches them an immediate reward for
Yeah.
saving or investing. So
Can they can
that's
they can they withdraw that money immediately and spend it on something
so
from
that's a
their savings
great
account?
that's a great question, right? So
Right.
no, they have to leave that. Like that's like forced savings when it comes there. But then they get to save the rest. And that actually, the rule is in our house is save 50%. And this
Mm.
is a formula I came up with more than a decade ago, about 15 years ago. But think about it this way: if you're a high income professional, if you're accredited, if you're making $200,000-300,000 or more a year, and you set out with the rule of save 50% before you just start living above your means, so you should be saving six figures or potentially even more a year. And if you're
Right.
not at that point, that's okay. But I would encourage you to look at other ways to make additional money, like a side business, or maybe even change your your job or your career if you need to. But if you save 50% and you invest it in the type of investments that your company, Ravi, and our company um, deals with, typically you're going to be able to hit financial independence in 7 years. And you could do the math with a financial calculator, but saving 50% means you're only living on 50% of what you make, and the number grows very rapidly. So I try to teach my boys that rule early, and they know it, and they know it for sure. But the thing is, they also get money for their birthdays. They get money for we just had Christmas here not too long ago. So they both walked away with over $100 from those holidays.
Right.
And we go to the bank, they put $50 in the bank. I match that $50. They now have $100 in the bank and they still get to spend $50. And that's something that I think that can set them up for success in that frugality that you and I just spoke about.
And what do they purchase? Like,
Yeah.
for example, are as their parent, you're like, look, we'll give you shelter, give you food. I know some parents
Yeah.
are like, we'll give you a set allowance, you buy everything else, versus some that are like, oh, we'll give you, everything you need for school and everything or school and living and, having a proper life, but like, all the extras you want, toys and games you buy. So how do you work that
Yeah.
out?
Yeah, I think you have to decide in your household how you're going to do that. I mean, we could certainly pay our children $1,000 a month and make them pay for camps and, sporting equipment and all those sorts of things. So, they don't have to buy their clothes, within reason. If they want, $150 pair of like Nike shoes or something, then we have them, they have to buy that, with their own money. We buy stuff within reason. We pay for their sports, that they do, but we also have a rule in our house when it comes to that. So if their grades, if any test grade or any grade in any class falls below either an 80 or 90%, it kind of depends on a certain situation, then they don't get to go to practice. If they don't go to practice, they don't play in games. And if they don't play in games, they actually have to pay us back for the team dues. So they've never gotten to that point, but it's
Yeah.
kind of a sliding scale. So, there's a level of commitment that we expect from that. And also that dollar a day, they have to clean their room, they have to do their laundry, they make their own lunches, they typically make their own breakfasts. Again, my boys are 12 and 14, but they've been doing this for multiple years. So they have to carry their own weight around the house.
Oh, I love that. And let's go through that in more detail because this is what I
Sure.
personally am struggling with,
Yeah.
because my kids, they get these $50 checks and,
Yeah.
$100 checks from grandpa or whatever it may
Right.
be.
Right. Yeah.
And they're like, hey, dad, I got $100, but we, do, I'm still I'm trying to work this system. And I feel
Yeah.
like my kids are old enough now that they can understand it,
Yeah.
but they don't really understand. They're like, okay, I have $100. And I'm like, okay, you can spend your money on a computer or whatever. They're like, well, no, you're going to
Right.
buy us that. That's, I don't want to spend my money on it. You buy that,
Sure. Yeah.
Um, so, so, and then they're not really doing their chores as well as they should because they don't really feel a need to do that. So I really like how you're structuring this. So let me get these down. So you're saying you get them to do their laundry, clean their room, make lunch, which is, I think it's totally reasonable for
Yeah.
kids
And we
their age.
buy the groceries, but
Yeah.
they have to pick out the healthy groceries to do that. Yeah.
Okay. So they pick their groceries out. I mean, they tell you what they want.
Yeah. So, and this came to be, Ravi, because a few years back, one of my sons he was basically saying like, I don't like what you packed me for lunch to me and my wife.
Yeah.
And I was like, okay, fine. Like, what do you want? So we go to the
Yeah.
grocery store and like say, hey, you can pick it out and be like, oh, I want Cheetos and Coke. It's like, well, no, you can't buy that. So we'd
Yeah.
have to agree on what they would buy, but they got to pick out what they were going to have in their lunches, and then they got to pack their lunch every day and do that. And by the way, it's a carrot and a stick, right? So
Yeah.
if they leave the lights on, if they're disrespectful to me or my wife, if they don't do their laundry, if they don't clean their room, if they don't, brush their teeth and do the stuff that we expect them to do on a daily basis, they don't get their allowance. So we
Mm.
have a little, and I have a link on this on my book. We have it's an accounting ledger, and in under Pay Your Children, you can click on that link on my website, and it takes you to what an accounting ledger is for those that aren't familiar. And basically, it's like balancing your checkbook. We really don't have checkbooks anymore, so it's kind of like their rolling ledger of how much they've made and gotten paid to do that.
So so an example, they don't clean their room one
Yep.
particular day, Are you like,
Yep.
okay, well, you're not getting your dollar for today?
Yep. So in the accounting ledger, it would say, didn't clean room, -$1. Yep.
Okay. And then
Yep.
you go on, and to those of you who haven't heard about Greenlight, I looked into this previously. I haven't invested in it, but I understand it's a great credit card for kids. It's like basically a
I
debit card.
Yeah, it's a debit card, and so we can transfer money, from and it's nice because like my older son, he went on a date last year, so he
Wow,
took
at
the
14.
he was 12 or 13 at the time.
Awesome.
Um yeah, so they
Great.
went to Starbucks and I'm like, dude, how are you going to pay for this? He didn't have a green light card at the time. And I'm like, all right, I gave him like a Starbucks gift card I had. I'm like, all right, you can pay me back, but like you can't roll in there with, a pocket full of quarters, dude. So um and look, I think that, a young man should treat a young woman to say, a coffee drink or something
Yeah.
like that.
Yeah.
Um, where they go to the movies, they split the cost of the movies, but it's like it's nice because they can go and he can have his credit card or debit card as it is and do that. There's some fees associated, but I think there's a big lesson that you can teach when
Yeah, that's a great lesson because
with them.
there's no, in my household, sometimes there's just no consequence. You can just,
Right.
they start fighting. You're like, hey, look, stop doing that, and they'll stop for
Yeah.
a second. But then
Yeah.
you get to the point where you're raising your voice, and it just, I'm like, okay, well, there's got to be a better way, and this is
Yeah.
just another way, like a
Yeah.
kind of like another stick
Yeah.
that you can use. So basically, is now the way you work in your household, if they if they'd say miss one thing out of 10, does that mean, hey, you don't get your salary for the day, you
Y-
lose that
Yeah,
dollar?
I will tell you that, Rob, it's happened,
Yeah.
several times, with the boys. But usually it just takes a reminder like, hey, okay, like you don't want to do your laundry, that's fine. Like I'm gonna, deduct $1 from from what you're getting paid here this
Yeah.
month. And next thing you know, they're carrying their laundry up and they're doing these things. So I think again, when you have the carrot and the stick, what you find is the behavior self corrects pretty quickly, and it's just kind of something that they do.
Yeah.
After about a month, the boys they've kind of always done their laundry. We don't we have somebody that helps clean our house, and
Right.
we just say, hey, your room has to be clean, like picked up every time that person comes. If it's not, then you know
Yeah.
they're not going to clean your room. You're going to do it anyway, and you're also not going to get your salary for the day.
Yeah.
So it helps instill those things, and it's nice. Like you have two kids. When you have two kids, and they're like, "Oh, why did you get paid more than I did this month?" And they see, "Oh, it's because you did what you were supposed to do, and I didn't."
Yeah.
Or I yelled at my mom, which is a big no-no. That might be a $5 deduction. You
Yeah.
can really institute some quick behavioral change when
Yeah. That's
finances
true.
are
You can,
involved.
yeah,
Yeah.
if you do something rude, that's more money. That
Yeah.
costs more.
Yeah.
It makes
But yeah,
sense.
I'll give you an example of like my younger son. They got an Xbox for Christmas, which was a really big deal in our household.
Yeah.
But they they got one game, so my son wants to get this. I think he wants to play with his friends, like and it's $10 a month. So he has chosen to use $10 of his money a month to buy that and do that.
Oh, that's
Which
great.
is yeah, which is a lot, right? It's like to us,
Yeah.
it's like the equivalent of like a car payment. It's
Right.
significant. Yeah.
Right. That's excellent. And you also mentioned you've opened a Roth IRA, which to those of you who
Yeah.
haven't, it's a great idea, and I do the same.
Yep.
Your children get paid, that money goes into a Roth IRA. It's tax deferred.
Yes.
Um,
Yeah.
and it's a great way to save for them, and also could potentially contribute to their education. Um,
Yes. Yeah.
uh, how much do you put in that Roth? How does that work?
Yeah. So we basically we do the max that they can based upon the amount that they're paid is what we do.
Okay.
So we keep a log of their hours and those sorts of things. So and what's nice, Ravi, is they've been doing it. I think we started when they were approximately 8 years old. So if you look at the IRS guidelines, you can't hire a 3-year-old kid to, clean your company car and manage like say an Airbnb or something like that. But a 12-year-old could probably do that.
Yeah.
So they've earned more money as the years have gone on. But what's nice is I still have paper statements come in for their Roth IRAs, and they can see how much money they make. And my older son came home last week, as a matter of fact, and he
Yeah.
had to interview somebody about, the stock market and investing. And for the record, I'm not a huge fan of qualified plans. And, I think, there's things that are better investing than the stock market, but I want my children to learn about them. And I
Right.
think dollar cost averaging over a long period of time and watching the market go up and down and seeing, wow, I earned $500 in appreciation in the market this month, whereas I earned $30, working, on a
Right.
daily basis. That's impactful, right?
Yeah.
That's
Yeah.
very impactful. And
Right.
it's like so I think, however you do it, I think you need to ask yourself, how can you do something where, a child can see that magnitude of difference that
Right.
investing can make over a period of time?
Now the money in savings, does that go in their Roth, or is that just is a separate amount that goes in their Roth?
No, it's separate. It could like it depends. Like, it depends how much goes in. But let me rephrase that. It's not separate. It all goes into that one account. But we match how much they get paid from the business because we give them $30 a month, but you know, that's not really that's not recorded earnings.
Right.
If
Right.
that makes sense. Yeah.
Okay. That does make sense.
Yeah.
Okay. So you spoke about a bank account, paying your children, teaching them, talking about money. What other concepts are there
Yeah.
that we missed?
Yeah, so there's two more. I know we're coming up on the end of our time here, but
Sure.
the next one, and these are kind of like your graduate type concepts. The next one, number four, I say start a business. Help your children start a business.
Mm.
We all talk. Everybody's talked about the lemonade stand on the side of the road, but keep your eyes open and ask your kids, hey, what are 10 businesses that you could start? And one that we came up with, this was pre-COVID. My wife and I have been going to CrossFit for about 10 years, and the boys would come with us specifically on the weekends. And one of the things I noted is I could never find a jump rope that was the right size. And
Right.
I went to buy a jump rope, and they were like $20 for like, plastic handles and a wire. I'm like, this is
Yeah.
crazy. So I looked at it, went online, find some bulk jump ropes, and we were talking to the boys. I'm like, hey guys, why don't you sell jump ropes? So we sourced them. We bought bulk jump ropes, and they ended up making, I think it was about $8 a piece. They sold them for $10, and we were able to source them at $2. They had to put them together, so
Yeah.
it was neat because my boys worked together to do that, and then they sold them. Now think about all the lessons you're learning, having to talk
Yes.
to people, sell a product. It's hard not to buy a jump rope
Yeah.
from a 7 and 9 year old cute little boys
Right.
doing
Right.
that.
Yeah.
But they made hundreds of dollars doing that,
Oh, that's
which
amazing.
was pretty cool. So that's a really neat thing that you can teach your kids. And then the final one is that teach your kids about the true value, but also the true cost of college, which is it can be a complex subject. But it's one of those things that in today's world in America, it's like, oh, go to college, get a good job. I would argue that most people today are not seeing a positive ROI by going to college. And you really
Yes.
need to understand that individually and be able to communicate, teach your children that. And that's where this concept of investing comes in, because if you understand what ROI is and making an investment and what the payback is, then if your children understand that, they can understand if they're putting $100,000 into a college education, are they
Right.
going to see the return on that or not?
Yes. Oh, that's an incredibly important concept, and that's something that I'll definitely have you back on, Chris, because these are
Yeah.
we should hash out starting the business and the cost of college in more detail. But
Yeah. Love to.
absolutely, that's an important concept. And I'll just share a couple things before we end. My
Yeah.
son is really into fixing iPhones. So
Oh,
he
cool.
actually, yeah, he was for Christmas he wanted a broken iPhones, and I was like, oh yeah, that's an interesting gift. And Santa delivered and gave him a big pound. It's you pay by the pound, so a pound of broken iPhones. He actually ended up putting them
Really?
together and creating a phone,
How
a
about that?
working phone out of that. So there's a business idea right there.
That's
On that
awesome.
front.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's
Um,
awesome.
yeah. So,
Yeah.
and then, the cost of college is skyrocketing. And I know folks that,
Yeah.
don't go to, some kids just don't go.
Yeah.
But we
When we're
can,
seeing,
yeah,
and I think the benefit is, we're because that ROI is changing, we're seeing people like Elon Musk start his own college. We're going to see these, new colleges, sprout up, especially, there's a lot of people that philosophically don't agree with things that are going on at places like Harvard today. And whether you agree with it or not, you should understand what's going on and, where your money's going, and be able to have a choice, with how to do that. So I think all these concepts that we're talking about, Ravi, are so valuable, and ultimately, help people set themselves up. And I mean, just think about it. If you can walk away, and avoid a couple $100,000 of student debt, that can really put you ahead in the financial game of life.
Absolutely. Well, Chris, this was an amazing conversation. I appreciate your time.
Absolutely.
If people want to learn more about you, maybe get your book, how would they do so?
Yeah. So two free resources for you if you're listening today. Number one, go to nextlevelincome.com/kids, and you'll see all these tips that Ravi and I talked about here today. So if there's something you want to dive into a little bit more, and you can also reach out to me by hitting the contact button on the website. And also feel free to get a free copy of our book. If you click on the book link, I'll even send you a copy. If you put your address in, our team will get a book sent out to you right away.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Chris.
Ravi, it's been my pleasure. Great to see you, my friend.
If you like this podcast, please hit subscribe or a thumbs up, and we'll see you next time.